When I think about our communities, I think about the racism that we've always been up against and how we as a people, Black folk, have always been able to, through our resilience and our pride, be able to do more with less.
Oftentimes, when we look at Black communities, traditionally we look at the deficits in those communities. I teach our students and I teach those around me to look at the assets of those communities. Our communities, in which are fueled with lots of positive energy and great work being done in them, often are misrepresented by our city as having lots of deficits, but there's lots of great things happening in those spaces. I was born and raised in the Hill District, predominantly Black community. I love my community. I want to go back to my community, but I don't look at it as just what I can do for that community. I want to work with those communities and help do what I can and help build them up. So I look at it from the assets versus the deficits, and I want to work alongside with the leadership of those spaces to help figure out what they need, right? We can't allow outsiders to come in, do these one and dones, think they're making an impact, think they're changing the world, and be out, right? I want people that are going to come in, build some roots, showcase their commitment, stay a while, build people up, and then we figure out together what we can do to make change in those spaces.
I have a piggyback question on that, and we can, go on to Andre and Bill and Quincy. For you guys, we did talk a lot about like redlining. We talked about the history of the cities that we all come from and that we've all experienced. DC, Maryland has it, Atlanta has it, even though Atlanta is primarily Black, but there's like Southwest Atlanta, there's Cascade, there's Gwinnett, there's Memphis, Tennessee, but also within your communities, you guys, I see as Black male leaders, but also who was that Black male leader for you, and how did Black male leadership influence you to be where you are? So I will, give that to Andre, and then I would love to hear all of you guys respond to that.
I was going to say let Andre answer that question, because I see a Black man smile, that's real big. Like, I need that. So yeah, let's hear it.
Well, I smile because when you said who was that Black male leader for me, I like two names popped in, and they're very iconic. One is a very iconic name. I mean, I grew up in DC. I was a child of Marion Barry, and I was adopted by a single Black woman. I did not have positive Black, male role models in my life for the most part. So it was Marion Barry in the sense that he was the leader of a city, of Chocolate City, because that's DC's nickname, right? And yes, he had his downs for sure, and he fell hard. But I can tell you, under the administration of Marion Barry, I always had a summer job, and I always had a summer job that was productive. I had a summer job that prepared me for the mentoring that I do now, because in DC, there were recreation centers in every neighborhood. You go 2-3 blocks and you find another recreation center for that particular neighborhood. And what he did was he hired all the kids in that neighborhood to go into those recreation centers where we played to become mentors and counselors for the younger kids in those neighborhoods. So I always had a job. And he did a lot for the city. For us, we really felt like he was a mayor for Blacks in the city of DC. The other person would be my big brother. And I mean, my mother got me a big brother as a big brother of America. And his name was Bill Beavers. And he was a Q. He was a substance abuse counselor. He lived in Southeast DC. Was a pretty humble man, but humble means, but like was sharp and was a very, very positive influence in my life. So those were the two Black males that were very, very influential in my life growing up. That was it for me. Yeah.
That's powerful. How about you, Bill? Who exemplified like Black male leadership for you?
Sure. I was fortunate. I had a lot of Black male role models. So starting with my dad, he was a doctor here, OB-GYN, and he was a part of a wave of Black doctors, right? That Pittsburgh had that they don't have now, right? Mm-hmm. This was in the 80s. I mean, it was 6, 7, 8 just Black OB-GYNs, right? And so one of the things my dad did was make sure to expose me to a lot of Black men. So I met Black lawyers, Black judges, Black teachers, Black professors. I would say that my number one role model behind my dad was a person named George Houston, who worked in the steel mills, his entire life until he lost his job in the 80s. But when my parents were busy getting their degrees, it was him and his family who really took care of me. And George, I got a chance to see this strong Black man who did incredible things, really sort of lose his sense of self when the steel mills left. And so that's something else that motivates me, because we just saw a lot of people who lost their way when our economy crashed.
Thank you for sharing that. And that's a beautiful reflection and shows the power of influence when you have someone that you can look to and there's a representation of who you are in essence as well.
Can I just say something on that point? There's a recent data point that just came out at the National Survey of Earned Doctorate Award doctorates that have been awarded that highlights that very point. And it showed that 40% of people who obtained a PhD in the sciences and people of color or not of color were people who had people in their family that had a doctorate degree or an advanced degree prior to that. So it really goes to show and back up. Now we have data that shows that when we see what what we can become, we have more ideas of what we can become as a people and what we can do.
Yes, thank you for that, Andre. And that is exactly what we are doing with this right here. And I thank you guys for putting yourselves out there for those who don't get to see it, because we stand in the gap for that. Quincy, we would love to hear your story, Pittsburgh and Memphis, Tennessee.
Absolutely. Well, when I think about our communities, I think about the racism that we've always been up against and how we as a people, Black folk, have always been able to, through our resilience and our pride, be able to do more with less, in reference to our communities being stripped of resources. So from that standpoint, Chaz, I loved how you talked about the pride in our communities. And Bill, I love how you talked about the history of our communities and knowing that history, because in many instances, a lot of our communities were thriving. Yes. And specifically because of systemic racism, were stripped of their resources. So of course, whenever you strip a community of resources, lack of education, food deserts, poverty is going to set in. And from that standpoint, a lot of the problems are going to set in. So for me, seeing a lot of poverty in Memphis, seeing poverty in some of the cities that I've been in, and knowing the influence of poverty and how it influences our stress level and how it influences our mental health. That's one of the reasons why I'm in the field that I'm in, and that's mental health is one of the reasons that I strive to do what I can in my role for the community. I'm considered to be a unicorn, and we all are to a certain extent. Black, as Black folk, we're used to being the only one in the room. What was very influential for me, though, I would say, is of course, my dad, as Bill noted, and I would also say the Black church as an entity. Growing up down south in the Bible Belt, I was able to be exposed to leadership by way of the Black church that was influential to me, and it was important for me to be able to see representation of Black male leadership, because in so many instances we don't get an opportunity to see that. Andre was bringing up the 40% of folks that get their PhDs, somebody in the family already having it. I think the percentage for Black teachers, Black male teachers, from K going up is around 2%. So that simply means that most folks can count on their hand the number of Black male teachers that they've had in their life. So in reference to education, and of course we're talking about poverty, if I'm not being taught in a way where I'm being loved, and if 18% of students represent Black students, and half of the students being suspended are Black males, I'm set up from the gate in the school system. And because I'm set up from the gate in reference to my education, now I'm being pushed into the prison to pipeline situation. So from that standpoint, representation is just highly important. It's important that we continue to push in reference to policy, in reference to culture, because we've always had a resilience about ourselves, but it's going to take all of us. It's going to take more than just changing some of these policies. It's going to have to be a whole culture change for us to continue to push the fight forward that we need.